Hey everybody, I'm Tom LeBlanc. I'm the editorial director for Commercial Integrator. Today I'm very happy to be joined by Brandon Breznick from Premier Mounts. Hey Brandon,
Hey Tom, how's it going? Good to see you.
it's good to see you. And when I see you, I often like to talk about esports because you guys are pretty tuned into that, and you personally have a lot of opinions about esports and the opportunities related to esports for integrators, and some opportunities I think many integrators don't realize the scope of. So first, maybe can we talk a little bit about what is an esports venue? I mean, certainly people know what a traditional sports venue is. What's an esports venue?
Yeah, an esports venue is very similar to traditional sports in the aspect where people want to see live gameplay. However, there are some differences between an esports venue and a traditional sports venue. So partly one big thing is actually esports. Attendees to these stadiums and venues, they actually don't necessarily need to sit in the front, close to all the action. They can actually be in the back because they can kind of see everything from a large LED screen or anything like that. It's kind of an interesting animal. Everyone's a fan. So whether it's traditional sports or esports, you get people who are very hungry and passionate and love what they, kind of consume in terms of content wise. Kind of a cool ecosystem. And I do think integrators do need to pay attention because a lot of integration happens behind the scenes that the average fan may not know about, but, people in the industry kind of know the ins and outs and the facets of everything around it.
Well, let's put that into perspective a little bit. Maybe you can talk about some projects, that as a manufacturer you guys might have been involved in. Can you help people kind of wrap their heads around what an esports project looks like?
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of big design build architecture firms really starting to understand the esports vertical as its own, separate from a soccer stadium or a football stadium or anything like that. Some kind of landmark like projects that have kind of gone on recently. One would be the esports center in Arlington. It's a $10 million project with over 100,000 square feet. Really meant to kind of be totally immersive and totally in tune with the attendees who come and visit it for different kind of games that will take place there kind of in the future. I believe it just opened last year, so it's kind of relatively new in its hype. But one of the biggest cultural things that stadium brings is actually in the heart of downtown Dallas and Arlington and that district, really close to Dallas Cowboy Stadium and a bunch of other sports venues. So not only is it a place for gamers to kind of introduce themselves into competition and meet people with their same likeliness, but it's also actually as an entertainment center for the whole city itself. So it kind of is a value add to the big venues that everyone knows and loves. A couple other projects, I know Full Sail University, I believe down in Florida, they have an area called the Fortress, which is actually going to be the largest esports venue for a collegiate team in the nation. And with esports now, kind of growing in terms of their venues and where they're going to be populated, university campuses are actually a huge hotbed that integrators can kind of work their way into because campus facilities are changing to kind of accommodate for the esports environment. So when Full Sail kind of did this whole project down there, it'll kind of open the door for, the University of Ohio or someplace in California or Washington. So you'll kind of see it stem from place to place. And another really cool project that's coming up is actually the Fusion Arena, which is going to be in Philadelphia. And the reason this is really cool is because it's affiliated with one of the biggest esports titles in the world, which is Overwatch. And what this is really going to allow for that franchise to do for their competitive scene is branch to a more home and away series. Traditionally, esports, two teams, they'd represent different regions, but they'd never have a home fan base or, kind of a hometown advantage per se. Now that you're getting venues popping up across the country, well, now the Philadelphia Overwatch team is going to have their own dedicated branded arena for their space, and they're going to have their own fan base cheering them on whenever they compete. So now you're bringing in a regional aspect, which is very similar to traditional sports, where they go to a Dodgers game, an Angels game, a Yankees game. They have their home fans and their home attendance. And I think for esports, catering, that hometown feel is definitely something you'll see in the future. And with that becomes a little bit more regionally spread.
Brandon, I really like the Full Sail University example because, for integrators, I think it helps to paint a picture of the opportunities. Because I think when people talk about these really interesting esports projects, the big arenas, some integrators can picture themselves playing in that environment, but others, think it might not apply to them because they don't do large venues. But most integrators and commercial integrators audiences do serve higher ed customers and they do serve corporate customers. And I think, the Full Sail example speaks to the fact that esports has become part of the culture in college. Like back when I went to college, it was all about like intramural sports and stuff like that. I think that esports, even, kind of thinking of it like an intramural type activity in colleges is becoming more important, and colleges, even down from that high level, really sophisticated venue aspect, are going to need esports solutions to accommodate what their students are interested in. And I think that applies to the corporate market and corporate campuses as well. People might not want to play with a foosball table. They might want to play esports near their cafeteria during their breaks at work. And I think that speaks to a big opportunity for integrators.
Yeah, and even now, really good example close to me is the University of California, Irvine. They're actually one of the first schools that, kind of opened up their own esports lounge casually for students, but they're also one of the first schools in the country that have given scholarships out for certain video game titles. So, being that the university understands that there's a huge investment in paying for someone's education to play video games, they're going to want facilities where they want these players to succeed, just as a football team would want, the right weights and, everything like that in terms of their athletic training. So in terms of, integrating this into schools, but giving them the best quality environment that they can be in is something that those schools who are really serious about esports going forward need to consider. And that's where we play a huge role is, what systems can we deliver to these schools to make sure that, one, it's easy to manage throughout the life of, how long the project's going to be withstanding for, but, just understanding our technical expertise and kind of funneling it down to them. So when they are able to kind of present the plans to the university board of directors, they have something that's so technically advanced and can kind of give a value add for the school. Being a helping hand and making that happen is a huge thing that integrators play, and anyone in the AV space really.
Okay, so in terms of preparing integrators for, what's next when it comes to esports, what is next? Like what are some of the big technologies that you think are gonna become important as we move forward with esports?
Yeah, so one thing that's hugely important for the gaming community is, being connected. So gamers love to be connected, whether it's to what's actually going on in the physical space or, outside, whether it's, fans at home who are interacting in the chat and things like that. So, obviously requiring yourself to be kind of plugged in at all times requires a transmission of data. So I think 5G will kind of be a huge kind of point for esports arenas moving forward to kind of just keep up the fan engagement through across their social media platforms and things like that. Other really cool things I think would be really great in the space would be the inclusion of artificial intelligence or augmented reality and virtual reality, actually. So augmented reality in terms of, different brands playing a role in there, having people interact with a product and using AR to kind of show like a cool video clip. Virtual reality, of course, so that way when people are at the venues, they can use, a headset or something like that to kind of see, really cool content or some kind of immersive experience through virtual reality. So overall, I think like 5G, VR, and AR are going to be huge driving points for people who are building esports venues going forward.
And then what about, Infocom's coming up? Are you guys going to be focusing a little bit on esports at the show?
Yeah, so actually, myself and our marketing director, Curtis Rose here at Premier Mounts, we're actually going to be giving a session. So Thursday morning of the show from 8 to 9 a.m. in the morning, we're going to have a discussion called Esports, a New Frontier into AV. So what we'll do is we'll kind of give you a little bit more of a backstory in the history of esports, but we'll actually kind of dive in on what it means for integrators. So, kind of examples of systems that have kind of already been pre-installed in existing facilities. So that way, someone who's unfamiliar with the space gets an understanding of how these, venues are kind of set up and put together. And if someone really kind of sits through the whole discussion that we have, they'll understand that there's just so many moving parts and pieces, but there's just such a huge need for us in the AV industry.
All right. Well, Brandon Breznick from Premier Mounts, we love hearing what you have to say about esports. Thanks so much for talking to Commercial Integrators audience about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.